Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and welcome to the next video on my guide to set building. As you can tell by the title of this will be part 5, and today's episode is going to be entirely dedicated to the discussion of sub-seeding, which is a really cool strategy that is implemented in competitive Pokemon games, mainly by grass types. But before we get started with the whole exploration of what exactly this is, let's answer the first question of what exactly is sub-seeding. So as I just hinted at a second ago, Sub-Seeding is a strategy used by grass-type Pokemon to slowly wear down your opponent's HP. It makes use of Substitute to protect you from attacks, and Leech Seed to restore the HP lost by the Substitute and lower the opposing Pokemon's health at the same time. It is a really effective strategy to implement in any game, and it is a very, very difficult thing to beat once you start going. The reason why it's so effective, as I'm saying, or as I've written right here, is because as you're leech seeding, not only is your opponent losing health, but when you're substituting, you're gaining all the health back that or for the most part, gaining a lot of the health back that you're using to make the substitute, allowing you to make another substitute and continue to protect you from attacks that your opponent is throwing at you. It's really fantastic. I can't really say any much more than that. It's one of my favorite strategies to use, and if you haven't ever used a sub-seeding set, I really suggest that you give one a shot because you'll probably be impressed on how easy it is to implement and how effective it is in a battle. However, there are a few ways to break substitute or sub-seeding, and it's not a 100% foolproof strategy as I'm going to show you right now. So as far as ways to beat sub-seeding if you're ever facing it in battle, and things to be aware of if you're ever using sub-seeding, one thing that you have to remember right off the bat is that grass types are not affected by it. Meaning that if you're up against a grass type Pokemon, it cannot be leech seeded, so there is no way that you can obviously use this strategy. Another reason why substitute or sub-seeding isn't 100% effective is that using substitute or your opponent using substitute will block a leech seed, meaning that again you cannot leech seed it and recover the health that you're gaining from the leech seed. Thirdly, taunt prevents substitute and leech seed from working, so if your opponent uses that on you, you won't be able to use either of the moves and will have to either switch out or use the other moves on your set. Another thing that isn't as effective but very useful against substitute is using U-turn and volt switch to break the sub, because what it does is it switches you out if your opponent leech seeded you that turn, breaks the sub, and now they have a fresh Pokemon in that does not have a leech seed on it, and you're exposed because you're no longer behind a substitute. And this is something that is really useful to know as someone playing against someone using a sub-seeding strategy, because it's a really easy way to beat a Pokemon like Whimsicott, but just by U-turning on its subs because it won't be able to gain any HP back. Another thing to make use of is multi-hit moves because they will break the substitute and then continue attacking after the substitute is broken. So a Pokemon like Chinchina, which is very commonly used in the NU tier but still really good Pokemon regardless of a tier, will have no problem beating sub-seeding because it will be able to break the sub with any of its multi-hit moves and then continue to hurt you further from that. And lastly, there are a few abilities that do get in the way of sub-seeding. The first one being Magic Coat and Magic Guard and Magic Bounce. Magic Guard obviously prevents any type of residual damage ever, so you can leech seed a Pokemon with Magic Guard. They just won't lose health and you won't gain any. So using it against a Pokemon like Reuniclus is completely useless. Similarly, using Magic Bounce or using it on a Pokemon against Magic Bounce won't do anything either because it'll just bounce the Leech Seed back at you. And yeah. Lastly, though not as commonly seen, is Liquid Ooze, which is an ability that makes it so that rather than gaining health from Leech Seed, you actually lose health. Now the thing about it is that your opponent is losing health as well, but it's basically sub-seeding in reverse. So you're losing health from trying to gain health. And it's not really commonly seen. There's only a couple of Pokemon that are used often that even have this ability, the main one being Tentacruel. So that one isn't really as big of a deal to worry about, but the other two are fairly more commonly seen, so that is something to be aware of when using a sub-seeding set. As for ways to make sub-seeding more effective, there are actually plenty of things that you can do to beat a lot of the weaknesses of sub-seeding that I just listed. The first one is to include a move that is super effective against grass types. And this is really easy to do, mainly because any Pokemon can learn Hidden Power, Fire, or Flying, or all those types that Grass types are weak against. Now, it's not always the case where you're going to be using a Pokemon that has good special attack with subs or with that is Sub-Seeding, but that is something to keep in mind. Also, a lot of Grass types are known for learning Sludge Bomb, so that also could potentially be a super effective move against other Grass types. And this will allow you to hit things that you can't Sub-Seed for some really good damage and not really have to worry about Sub-Seeding as your only strategy against them. The next thing to do to make Sub-Seeding a little bit more effective is to have a secondary form of recovery. This could often work in the form of Synthesis, because a lot of Grass types learn that for recovery. You could always have Rest on it. Recover, any of those moves are really great for allowing you to continuously Sub-Seed your opponent, because if you are losing a little bit more HP than you're gaining because of the substitutes and your opponent maybe not having a really high health to leech off of, having a secondary form of recovery will allow you to get back up to greater range of HP and continue your Sub-Seeding. As for the third option, it's really effective to use Sub-Seeding with either a Confusion or another status move. If any of the Sub-Seeders that you're using learn like Teeter Dance or Confuse Ray or Swagger even, that is really great, because what it'll do is not only prevent your opponent from attacking on the turn if they hit themselves in Confusion, but allow you to get up a free sub in the process and get some more HP recovery. Also, you could potentially use your other attacking move on the set if you do have a Confusion move with it on a turn that they get confused. So it's really good to have. And similarly, status moves can work very well in your favor in this. Toxic is really great because it'll allow them to constantly lose HP all the time. Paralysis is really good because they can be fully paralyzed, similar to how Confusion works, in a way that they could be immobile for a turn, allowing you to get up a free sub. Burning is really great because that'll make your subs harder to break if it's against a physical attacker. And obviously, Sleep and Freeze are also really good too. And lastly, one thing that was actually more recently introduced to me, and something that I haven't been doing really until I saw this used in a battle against me, is using Sub-Seeding with a move like Protect or another move that keeps you invulnerable for a turn. Because what this will do is it'll allow you to gain free recovery on all the turns that you use Protect for, or another move. If you're using it with a Pokemon like Saucebuck, which is a video I posted a while back, I had Bounce on my Sub-Seeding set, because not only did it allow me to be invulnerable for a turn, but it also allowed me to implement status on it. So that kind of had a dual purpose to it, which is really cool, and it made the set that much more effective. And these are really good moves because I'm pretty sure every single Pokemon except Regigigas learns Protect. Actually, probably Magikarp doesn't either, but you get the point. And a lot of Pokemon can learn an invulnerable move like Dig or Fly or something like that. They're not that commonly seen, but on a Sub-Seeding set, they can be very effective. Now, as far as types of Sub-Seeding, I've actually divided them into 3 categories, and not a lot of people have thought about it this way before, and I think this is probably the best part of this video just because it's kind of a really strategic way of thinking about how you're going to implement a Sub-Seeding set. So the first one that I have for you is the type 1, which I referred to as fully defensive. And as you can see here, this type of Sub-Seeding makes use of high investment in HP and both defenses to make your subs very difficult to break. And this is very easy to do on Pokemon with some pretty good defenses. And what it'll do is, since your subs will be difficult to break, it'll allow you to gain an extra turn of recovery since your opponent won't be able to break your sub right away. And so with that, I actually have a set for Ludicolo that I figured would actually fit this type really well. So in this Ludicolo set, we're going to start by giving it a bold nature to increase its physical defense but lower its physical attack, and then we're going to be going with the ability Rain Dish. And if you do use this set or something similar to this on a team with Rain, such as even an OU, because I think Ludicolo works really well on OU, but that's besides the point, this can be even more difficult to deal with. So for the EVs, as you can see right here, full or max HP and split defenses for both physical and special defense to give us that fully defensive type. And then for the item, we're going with Leftovers for that added recovery. As to the moves though, Substitute and Leech Seed, obviously, and then the second 2 move slots are where things can start to get really creative and interesting. Ludicolo is fortunate enough to learn Scald, which is fantastic on a fully defensive Sub-Seeding set because you could potentially get a burn on your opponent. And if the opponent just so happens to be a physical attacker, now they have half their attack, making your subs even more difficult to break from the physical side, which is fantastic and kind of the point of it. As to the last move though, we could either go with Ice Beam because that is super effective against grass types, as one of those things that I said could make Sub-Seeding even more effective, or we could go with Teeter Dance because Ludicolo does learn that as a form of confusion, and that could be really great too because that could allow you to get a free substitute up in the process. But overall, this is just a really solid example of what a fully defensive Sub-Seeding set could be. There are probably a lot of other Pokemon that could run a set similar to this in the fully defensive category, but this is just one of my favorite examples to demonstrate. As to the next type of Sub-Seeding, this is the type I'm going to refer to as the Glass Cannon, and as you can see from the screen right here, it is Sub-Seeding that makes use of high speed and low health to allow you to always substitute before your opponent attacks and restore a greater percentage of your HP. So what this means is that by making use of 0 EVs in your HP, you're actually gaining a greater percentage of your HP back each time you recover from Leech Seed, thus allowing you to actually have more 25% of your health than you would if you had max HP. So this will allow you to set up more substitutes than normal because the recovery you're getting back is more significant. So with this, I have a set that I actually just posted pretty recently with Shiftry just to demonstrate this to you again. So in this Shiftry set, we're going to start off by giving it a Timid nature to increase its speed, but lower its physical attack, and then we're going to go with the ability Chlorophyll or Early Bird, it doesn't really matter. For the EVs though, 4 for defense, max special attack, and max speed, and item as leftovers. And with this EV investment, you can see that we're putting 0 EVs into defense except for that 4 right there, and 0 EVs into our HP, so that we can have as low of an HP number as we can to allow the Leech Seed recovery to be more significant of a percentage of our own health. So with the moves, obviously Sub and Seed. And then lastly, we're going to go with Dark Pulse as our other attacking move, or our only attacking move, I guess. And the reason why this is so effective and the move of choice on the set over something like Giga Drain is because of the fact that you do have a chance to flinch with Dark Pulse. It has a 20% chance to flinch, which could turn into a free turn of Leech Seed recovery if you get that. And also because it's just a stab attack and it's really powerful. That's just good to have regardless. It's obviously neutral against most grass types, but that's just as good in this case. You could run something like HP Fire, but really you get more mileage out of Dark Pulse in my opinion. And then lastly, we're going to go with Protect just for that added recovery on the turns that you have not subbed to get even more Leech Seed. But as you can see, this does fit the Glass Cannon archetype, is that how you say it, archetype, really solidly because of how you can't really take a hit, but because you're faster, you'll be able to set up subs and Leech Seed and Protect a lot easier. So the goal is to not obviously take any damage outside of your substitutes breaking with a set like this, but it can show how a Pokemon that isn't that defensive can still get a lot out of Sub-Seeding. As for the last type of Sub-Seeding, this is kind of a hybrid of the two, and I'm going to refer to it as the Speedy Tank. So as you can see from the screen, it's a type of Sub-Seeding that makes use of high investment in speed to allow you to be faster than your opponent, and investment into your defenses to make your substitutes difficult to break. Now again, HP is not usually factored in, but it can be a stat to invest in depending on your base stats. And what I mean by that is if you are a Pokemon that is naturally fast, you could just be a Speedy Tank in general. So a Pokemon like Jumpluff, for example, is just really fast. So you could just invest in HP or just invest in the defenses. So 252 physical, 252 special defense, or something like that. It's really dependent on base stats for this, but it's kind of a hybrid of the two, and it can work just as effectively as the others. So for an example of this, I actually have a Celebi set that I came up with that can really take advantage of the Speedy Tank Sub-Seeding type. So for this Celebi set, we're going to start by giving it a Timid nature to increase its speed but lower its physical attack, and then we're going to go with the ability Natural Cure just because that is Celebi's only ability. For the EVs though, this is pretty much the epitome of what I just said about the Speedy Tank thing. So 128 defense, 128 special defense, so split across the board, and then 252 EVs into speed to give us our highest speed we can possibly get. And the reason why this works effectively on Celebi, and a lot of others too, Superior is really good at running this type of Sub-Seeding set as well, is because Celebi has just a natural high bulk because it has base 100 stats across the board. So even with only half investment into your defenses, they're still going to be pretty difficult to break just because Celebi is naturally bulky, and it also will have a naturally high speed as well, so this will actually allow you to outspeed a lot of things. And for the item, obviously leftovers is the way to go. And for the moves, Sub-Seed, and then with that, I had to think a little bit more about what type of type coverage I needed with this set, so that's why we're not going to go for like a secondary move like Protect or something, because Celebi can still be pretty darn effective outside of Sub-Seeding, and I wanted to retain a bit of that as well with the set. So we're going to use Psychic just because that's a main stab attack, and we're going to round that off with HP Fire. And the reason why we're using HP Fire is obviously for all the things that won't be able to be hit by Leech Seed, and mainly a Pokemon like Ferrothorn, which would resist Leech Seed and Psychic, can be taken down pretty easily from the HP Fire. Overall, though, this is really effective in OU, at least. It's kind of catered towards that. Against Pokemon like Scissor, for example, which obviously want to come in and U-turn on you, you have the HP Fire to deal with that as well. As I said before, U-turn can be a big pain in the butt for Sub-Seeders. And most of the other Pokemon that you are able to outspeed, you could probably Sub-Seed. Even a Pokemon like Heatran, which would be a pretty darn good counter to Celebi, you could effectively Sub-Seed it this way, even though you don't have a really good attacking move to use against it. But overall, this is pretty much the 3 types of Sub-Seeding I wanted to share with you. There might be others, a little bit of tweaks here and there on the 3 types that I brought up today, but overall they're going to be they're all going to fit into one of these 3 categories, and they're the 3 categories that I feel are the most effective to run. So whether you want to go fully defensive, have a glass cannon, or like a Speedy Tank like this set, Sub-Seeding is an excellent strategy to implement, and something I suggest that you all give a shot if you get the chance to. There are a ton of other sets to use, even with just the Pokemon I used for this video, as well as a ton of other Pokemon that can use Leech Seed in a lot of creative ways. So I implore you to go look for those and tell me what you come back with. Obviously, Whimsicott is like the king of Sub-Seeding because of the whole prankster thing, but overall, these 3 types are really good to know about, and I want to thank you all for watching this video and getting a little bit more educated about Sub-Seeding than you might have been before. I know a lot of you already know what this is, but it's still fun to talk about in a competitive way because, yeah. So that is it for this video, everyone. So thank you all for watching this part. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. I know it's been a while since I posted an episode of this recently, but I came back with this one. I'm really excited about Sub-Seeding, so I wanted to make this video and share it all with you. So that's it. Thank you all for watching. Take care and goodbye, and I will see you next time in whatever I decide to do for my 6th part. See you later, everyone.